the spirit of Halloween, we are going to be reading Cinder Hazel, the Cinderella of Halloween by Deborah Nourse Lattimore. Here is the title page. It was another day in the dustbin for Hazel. While her two snobby stepsisters, Hermione and Hildy, had fun casting spells and muttering curses, it was Hazel's job to clean the floor. Hazel swept from one end of the room to the other until the entire room was covered with a thick layer of dust and dirt. "You know, Hazel," said Hermione, "instead of sweeping, you could fly that broom." I'm not good at flying it," said Hazel. She scooped up a pan full of ash and poured it right on top of her head. "This is what I'm good at," bellowed Hazel. D-I-R-T. "You are disgusting, absolutely yucky," said her stepmother. "All you think about is dirt. For all the time you spend in that fireplace, we ought to call you Cinder Hazel." "Ooh, would you?" asked Hazel. That very night, while Cinder Hazel played jacks with dirty lumps of coal, her stepmother and stepsisters got all spiffed up. They combed their frightful hair and coated their shoes with very clean shoe tar. "Going somewhere?" said Cinder Hazel. "Why, tonight's the witch's Halloween ball," said Hermione. "And," said Cinder Hazel's stepmother, "rumor has it that Prince Alarming might come out of hiding tonight." "Yes," chortled Hildy, "and he's looking for a bride. But Cinder Hazel, you can't come. We don't want to be seen with you." "That's right," added Hermione. "You're so messy you'd make us look bad." Girls, said the stepmother. "Cinder Hazel couldn't get there if she wanted to. Just look at that cracked broom." The three of them laughed and laughed. Then they leaped onto their brooms and blasted out the window. "Oh, who cares?" muttered Cinder Hazel. "Who wants to dance with some hoity-toity prince anyway?" But as the night grew darker and darker, Cinder Hazel started to simmer. "Think they can tell me what to do? I'll show them." Cinder Hazel squished her hat on her head, grabbed her broom, and jumped on. Crack! Snap! The broom broke. Cinder Hazel growled. She crossed her eyes. She crossed her fingers. She crossed her legs and twisted around in a circle. Poof! Cinder Hazel's hat turned into a pile of dirt. "Aw, nuts," cried Cinder Hazel. "I'm staying home. Besides, there's not a single thing I'd like over at that palace." "That's not what you think," said a voice. "Who's there?" asked Cinder Hazel. A big cloud of smoke exploded in the middle of the room. There stood a short, plump witch, dressed in dirty dish rags. "Wow, great clothes," said Cinder Hazel. "Who are you?" "I'm your witchy godmother," replied the witch. "And I can't believe you're not going to the ball. Didn't you know there are 15 filthy fireplaces over there?" "Really?" asked Cinder Hazel. "Really," said the witch. "And there's something else your stepsisters didn't mention. Prince Alarming is the king of dirt. If I were you, I wouldn't let them keep you from going." "By my witchy wig, you're right," pronounced Cinder Hazel. Then she frowned at her broken broom. Step aside, said the God Witch. This is my job. She waved her hands around her head and said, Bad old bats and a toad that's meaner, make this broom a vacuum cleaner. Boom! The broom vanished, and in its place sat a nice, slightly used Hoopler vacuum cleaner. Now toot off to meet your prince, said the God Witch. And remember, my spells don't work past midnight. Cinder Hazel sat down on the canister, grabbed the hose, and pulled back. Vroom, vroom, vroom went the vacuum cleaner. It flew up the chimney with Cinder Hazel on it. Cinder Hazel zoomed across the sky towards the palace. A magnificent trail of charcoal smoke billowed behind her. With a downward twist on the hose, Cinder Hazel and her vacuum swooped down the biggest chimney she'd ever seen. Cinder Hazel landed on the hearth of the grand ballroom. The party was in full swing, and Cinder Hazel was full of dirt. Cinder Hazel was so yucky that even she wouldn't have known herself. Look! Cried her stepsister Hermione, pointing at the mess that was Cinder Hazel. It's that dirty prince! Oh! Squealed Hildy. The prince came out of hiding at last. Princey, Princey! All the witches cried as they tugged Cinder Hazel out of the fireplace. Hey, wait a minute, cried Hermione, squinting at the dirty face. That's not the prince. That's my stepsister, Cinder Hazel. What's that thing with her? Asked Hildy. It looks like a vacuum cleaner. Ha ha ha, she guffawed until everyone was laughing, but across the ballroom, two beady little eyes were watching from behind a trash can. Stop that laughing, or I'll put a spell on you, growled Cinder Hazel. This made everyone roar even louder. So Cinder Hazel crossed her eyes, she crossed her fingers, she crossed her legs, and twisted around in a circle. Poof! All the witches' brooms turned to dirt. Dust covered everyone in the room. The witches were furious. Clean up this mess, or we'll put a spell on you, they screamed. Oh, phooey, said Cinder Hazel. She chanted, Eye of a newt and a raven's wing, rise up, old Hoopler, and make them clean. The vacuum cleaner rose into the air and headed for the witches. Vroom! It sucked up the dirt, but it also sucked up their socks, and it sucked up the punch and the paper decorations. Make it stop, yelled Hildy. Cinder Hazel ran across the ballroom, grabbed the trash can, and heaved it at the Hoopler. Just then, the palace clock began to strike midnight. With the 12th dong, the witchy godmother's magic wore off. Poof! Brooms and party goodies blew across the room. The vacuum cleaner vanished, and kablunk! Cinder Hazel's broom fell into cracked pieces on the floor. The witches piled onto the mess, screeching for their shoes, hats, brooms, and socks. Just then, the biggest dirt ball Cinder Hazel had ever seen walked up to her. Ew! Yucky! Exclaimed Cinder Hazel, grinning. You're filthy! That's my name, all right, said the dirt ball. Prince Filthy, alarming, and I must say, you are the dirtiest thing I've ever seen. Thank you, your royal filthiness, Cinder Hazel replied. Why have you been hiding so long? Partly because I was told not to, said the prince, and partly because it's such a bore dancing with a bunch of hoity-toity witches. Yuck, they're so clean. You know, I came here tonight because I was told not to, said Cinder Hazel, and she rubbed her nose with the hem of her skirt. The prince thought for a moment. I would ask you to stick around, he said, but I'm not sure there's enough dirt for the two of us. That's what you think, cried Cinder Hazel. Check this out. She threw back her head. She crossed her eyes. She crossed her fingers. She crossed her legs, and she whirled around like a tornado. Kaboom! An explosion of fireplace soot blew all the other witches out the door. Not to be outdone, the prince squinted and stuck out his tongue. Kablam! Dirt showered down from the ceiling. Obviously, said Cinder Hazel, there's plenty of dirt around here, but who says I want to stay? Fine, said the prince. Go away. I can see we can't stand each other. But Cinder Hazel didn't go away, and of course she and the prince actually liked each other a lot. In fact, they lived filthily ever after. P.S. Cinder Hazel never did have any glass slippers, but on their first wedding anniversary, the prince gave her a more useful present: grass clippers.